This is a point of view program. The views expressed are those of the participants and not necessarily those of the station.
It says live. It says post to stream too.
It's time to evolve ideas. Evolution did not end with us growing thumbs. You do know that, right?
KBMF LP Butte, America's Most Radio.
One more. Okay, now go. We are a non-profit Butte radio station where a new volunteer DJ takes to the airwaves.
I can start again. To start again.
Thank you for supporting community radio by tuning in to 102.5 FM today. We are a non-profit Butte radio station where a new volunteer DJ
I hate new Facebook, by the way.
Every 2 hours or so.
By the way, it says here fishy on this thing. I don't know how that happened, but we can edit it now, I guess.
The 4 to 6 p.m. slot every Sunday has been home to the Post-Orthodoxy show for the past year.
It's on this page.
Due to unforeseen circumstances, today is our last episode to air on KBMF for the foreseeable future.
I don't know why it's
named
that.
We have crafted this episode
we can change it.
I will change
with
it.
thought-provoking quotes from history's best and brightest around the idea of censorship. If you're curious about what's going on, you're welcome to join us between now and 6 p.m. on our live stream at facebook.com/postorthodoxy, twitch.tv/the Seviers, or Post-Orthodoxy on YouTube, where, as always, we look forward to your feedback and participation.
Hello, welcome to my art form.
It's time for Post-Orthodoxy.
Okay, I feel good.
Changing our minds. Yeah, man.
With your host, Dark and Ainsley Sevier. Maybe what they believe about reality isn't all of reality? What? I know, right?
We are on a mission to have a better time with more people more often.
The question is, how do you get there?
Post-Orthodoxy explores strongly held beliefs, how those belief systems divide or connect people, and what might be found beyond those reality bubbles.
Keep calm. Don't lose your head.
Eric Althoff. He is there.
Has the right to freedom of opinion and expression.
I can't find the
This
video.
right
I have it. Share it off on my page.
Hold opinions without interference.
I have to be able to find it.
And to seek.
It was on the Post-Orthodoxy page, and you scroll.
Hi,
Hi, folks. Welcome to the show. We're having some technical difficulties using a different way to share the video. So instead of off of our personal streams, it is now being shared off of the Post-Orthodoxy Facebook page. If you're watching it on the Post-Orthodoxy page or on our page, it would help us if you can share it to your page or to other people who you think might be interested in the kind of programming we provide.
All right, I've renamed it.
Oh, yeah?
I found it on your page.
Okay, I'm going to refresh and see what it says now.
Share it to my page.
Now what's it called?
I'm suddenly starving.
Oh, geez.
So,
Oh, Eric Althoff is in. Pia Soliwoda from Oahu, Hawaii is here. Thank you for tuning in, folks. End of season 1. Very good. We're
end
good
of
to go.
season 1, it's true. Our first anniversary was, it was technically September 12th was our first official radio show as Post-Orthodoxy. We were modulating from Copacetic Conversations with Mokai Malope.
Yes.
He and Dark had been doing a show for a couple of summers where they interviewed people with strongly held beliefs and endeavored to have a kind conversation about stuff that people usually fight about.
Even a possibly productive conversation.
A productive conversation. Like, can we figure out why do you hold that belief and can we get along about it?
Can we get over it with each other? Can you?
Yeah.
I let you have that. You can let me have mine, and we can find all the things that actually connect us beyond the small things that don't connect us.
Right.
You know.
And in cases where it got into deep human rights issues, such as racial problems or abortion, we actually had productive evolution with people who had just had a strongly held belief of a particular direction because they'd never had the opportunity to talk with somebody one-on-one about the other side of the coin that was kind. Post-Orthodoxy evolved from copacetic conversations. When Mokai left the country, we wanted to keep having important conversations about difficult subjects. And one of the last people that we had interviewed was Anna, who is struggling and or leaving her Mormonism.
Oh, yeah.
And when we went out for a drink after that show to talk with her about the show, we always love doing a post-op with our interviewees. It just became more and more apparent that there are so many people who are trying to get to a place where they can think their own thoughts. They're trying to get to a place where they don't just keep thinking certain thoughts so that they stay loved. I had that experience getting out of a cult.
Yes.
Dark had that experience getting out of a cult.
Yes.
If you're just now joining us and you're wondering what's happening, we made a radio show that's going to air for 2 hours on KBMF, hopefully, that is
fully entertaining for folks
very
that can't get online.
It's got some background crickets and a whole bunch of great quotes about censorship. And so that's going to air on KBMF.
From now till 6.
From now till 6, and we're going to have a conversation with you guys. Because
right. You're our main audience. Usually we have microphones in front of our faces.
We get to actually look at you
guys. We don't get to talk to you guys, and you're the guys that we are actually interacting with online.
For instance, Pia says, you're supposed to give me a snack now.
Oh, for showing up?
Feed your girlfriend.
Oh.
Because I was hungry.
Oh.
Yeah. I'll be okay. I'll just drink a ton of water.
Oh,
also, now we can swear. I can say I'm going to drink a shit ton of water.
That's right.
Yeah, because we're not on the radio. We've been wanting to include more post-orthodoxy shows throughout the week where we could talk about things you can't talk about on community radio. And some events happened this week that have just sort of plunged us off the deep end into podcasting from home.
Right.
And so I'm going to share a link to a GoFundMe that I threw together.
I haven't seen it yet.
With my dying breath as we were running out the door. Because if we can just raise like $1,000, we can buy anything we would need, all of the basic, like, not the Joe Rogan version of things.
No.
But like just a simple like right now we're borrowing a microphone.
Yes.
To record this show. It doesn't even have a case on the batteries on the back. And so we want to get some microphones. We want to get some...
It really helped to have a new computer.
Yeah, well, the computer's a little outside the $1,000 budget.
We're looking for some basic stuff.
If we're going to live stream to you guys at home, we need a real camera and real microphones and this thing that they plug into, etc., etc. Dave Pruden says, enchanté. Roy Sykes, hi, I got it to
Roy.
work.
Yay, Roy.
Thank you, Roy. That's awesome. And then 710 and 805 says, the microphone is picking us up from hella far away. Thanks for explaining. You're just getting our sound through the room of KBMF as usual on the live stream, and then we're recording it on a Zoom H4n for later, so we can have a podcast for later.
Right.
So Post-Orthodoxy started as the daughter of copacetic conversations and has become a show where we talk about strongly held beliefs, dogmas, orthodoxies, things you're not supposed to ask questions about. Can we have cognitive liberty? Can we have free will? Can we have freedom of speech? Ideas have consequences, and when you're clinging to ideas because you're afraid you're going to get kicked out of something, or you're afraid you're going to die, or you're
nobody's going to love you,
afraid you're going to be unloved, which is why I stayed in the church I was in for so long. And it came true. I left that church and my parents don't talk to me anymore, which is really unfortunate for me, but
it's unfortunate for them too.
The pathways that I have found in navigating the borderlands between belief systems, I want to share with other people who have just been popping up on my timeline and in my messages over the last few years, who are also having a hard time. Or maybe are like, I don't want to be like this anymore because I'm not having a good time in this worldview, but I'm afraid if I leave, all the horrible things will happen, because that's how they keep you in dogmatic worldviews, is the other guys are the bad guys, and if you go out there, you'll get destroyed. So you better just stay in here with these beliefs.
Right.
And I want to help people.
Yes.
Dark's mission statement as an artist is to have a better time with more people more often. And sometimes before you can work on having a better time, you need to work on alleviating suffering. Post-Orthodoxy has been attempting for the past year to alleviate suffering through cognitive liberty. And Dark has a very carefully prepared statement for why we are playing one thing on the radio and another thing for you on the live stream today.
I have some opening statements that we have written together, but I've added a couple of paragraphs. And there may be some edits. Did you want to read that? Because we have two prepared statements. One is our opening statement. That was your kind of opening statement of why we're here and what we're doing. I have an opening statement, and then I have another piece that is an official statement that we will get to after we put this thing into context a little bit.
And it's not all going to be official statements.
No.
We just have to say some really strong stuff, and we wanted to make sure that we're being responsible about how we said it. One of the things that's definitely come to our own attention over the last couple of months, on top of being afraid that we were being boring by talking about the same things all the time, we were listening to our own shows as we edited them each week and realizing our tone comes across as really confident. And confidence is great if you agree with what the person is saying. But if you don't agree with what the person is saying, confidence sounds like arrogance or something dangerous.
Something dangerous.
And since we're talking about things that exist outside mainstream belief systems, whether it's religions beyond Christianity, political structures beyond the U.S., right and left, red, blue.
Examining drug policy in America.
If you are ever confronted as a human animal with information that doesn't match how you think the universe is, that information is already scary, primally. Whether you agree with it or not, whether the person is being nice or not. And we were already examining that we wanted to modulate our tone because we are doing these in service of ourselves and in service of our audience. We want to have valuable conversations with you guys. We want to share things that we've learned. We want to continue learning and evolving. And if overly confident tones are a turnoff, we can find other ways. That's why we wrote everything out ahead of time.
We're hoping to modulate our tones. So I have a prepared statement. I can read that. Ainsley is over on the keyboard. One of the reasons that we started live streaming on Facebook and on Twitch and on YouTube is to expand the capacity for our listening audience to interact and to give us feedback on our perspectives and the things that we are talking about. That is the point of all this social media.
That's why we're doing all this computer stuff.
Yes.
We're always like, please send us comments, share us sources with us, share your opinions with us. We're here to have a conversation with you guys.
Well, apparently there's a group of people that have not or declined to interact with us via the avenues that we have available to us while the show is happening.
And also, apparently, all of these people know us, so they could have just messaged us.
They could have messaged us, but anyway, so I'm going to read...
We said, here are our opinions, here's some data.
Yes.
If you don't like it, send us a message and we can talk about it.
So I got two pieces here. I'm going to read the first piece, which sets up the second piece, which is pretty juicy. Okay. This will be the final episode of Post-Orthodoxy to air on KBMF until the specter of censorship is removed. We have been censored from discussing anything that might put into question the wisdom of choices made by our government concerning the COVID-19 lockdown and various other policies, governmental policies. I'll clarify the horror of that statement in a more exhaustive official statement after these opening remarks. We are calling ourselves a meta-news program, which is a fancy way of saying that we are an opinion show. We often look at current news on important topics ranging from drug policy, social justice, and politics to the current elephant in the room of SARS-CoV-2. As entertainers and educators, we operate under the meta-news idea to take an in-depth look at how we're getting our news, how that news is reported, and how that news is interpreted by the audience. The Post-Orthodoxy show, Ainsley Sevier and myself, yours truly, Citizen DJ, Dark Sevier, are currently learning a very powerful lesson about the dangers of people misinterpreting content. This censorship that we are under this week was imposed on us by the station manager of KBMF. We understand that he was under pressure from a few very vocal radio station listeners to do something about post-orthodoxy. The station manager listened to last week's show and made a written accusation against us stating that we were spreading misinformation. We deny that accusation and consider it dangerous.
Just because you don't like the information that we're sharing doesn't mean that it's wrong.
In a meeting on Friday, Ainsley and I met with the station manager to discuss last Sunday's show And it became very clear that what we are doing on this show in general, which is what we have been doing for a year now, was not understood by the station manager or the vocal opposition to that particular program. In essence, we are being blamed for other people's misunderstanding. I understand that last week's show, out of context of the ongoing body of our work, could be misunderstood by people that are more black and white or perhaps blue and red in their thinking. The entire point of our show is non-binary. This misunderstanding resulted in a lot of anxiety and gnashing of teeth for our more partisan-minded friends. We take full responsibility for not being more clear about where we are coming from each and every show. An effort to not be redundant resulted in some folks who we dearly care about to misunderstand not only what we are attempting to communicate, but apparently who we are as people. This may not be the best time or place to attempt to clearly define ourselves as humans.
This show?
This show at this moment. But I will take the time now to clarify our perspectives that were misunderstood last week and the mission overall of our show. It's clear to us that SARS-CoV-2 is a deadly disease. We understand that great suffering has been wrought by it. In addition to the death toll, however you tally it, people are suffering long-term health efforts from this virus. Some of that suffering is directly from health effects related to this virus. Some of that suffering is coming from the medical professionals that have had a very different, close-up, and personal experience of this crisis. In a sense, it is clear to me that the reality of the medical professionals that have been on the front lines is magnitudes different than the experience of the general public. Some of that suffering is from acute anxiety in the general population over what might happen in regards to this virus. We know that the economic wreckage from the lockdown is not just about money. We know there is a spike in spousal abuse, child abuse, alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide, and a myriad of damaging circumstances unforeseen by the architects of the lockdowns and is largely unseen at present by those not suffering these problems. We know there is suffering in the hearts of the highly empathic and compassionate among us who are impacted by the compounded suffering happening around us. We know that there is an unfortunate intersection of anxiety and trauma in relation to the virus that is having an explosive reaction with the heightened political anxiety and trauma that has been building in this country toward November. It's an inflammatory condition on many, many levels. The folks that complained about last week's show seem to have interpreted that our view of the mask policy was that the policy was dumb or wrong.
You might as well pause,
Yeah.
because our video got cut off.
Oh, come on.
I know. I'm sorry.
All right, let's pause.
See if it picks up with another video.
Where did you go? How long ago was that?
There just seems to be
1 minute.
massive internet non-happenings.
So, how do we find it now?
Let's see.
Is the station still
Twitch
going?
is live.
Okay.
Yeah, the station is still going.
Is it? Yeah.
I didn't have it turned down. Oops.
Let's go to I guess I'll go to Post-Orthodoxy and see if we can pick it up again.
It should start another one on Post-Orthodoxy. Yeah, lots of cutting out.
It's coming up again under Test Stream 2, I think.
Oh, god damn it.
Okay, we're back here.
We're back live on Facebook?
Yeah. We're back. It says Test Stream, Post-Orthodoxy, Test Stream 2 for some reason.
I'll fix it again.
We'll move that over. I'm going to move that to our page. If you found us again, I'm going to bring it back. We're going to bring it back.
I had to switch back to classic Facebook because none of the features that I need are available on new Facebook.
Well, luckily we only have a few days left. Do you still have time to do that?
Have time to do what?
Use the classic Facebook before it goes away.
They said sometime in September it's going to get forced through.
Sam Debris says that we cut out for a couple of moments, and Astrid said she can see and hear us now. So we're going to... I don't know where you guys lost us, so I'll go back a minute. I'm going to reiterate the things that we want to be very clear on, and then we can carry further.
Yeah.
And
but not with an overly confident tone that makes people think that we're angry or hateful.
So I'm going to try to clarify things that were misunderstood last week. It's clear to us that this virus is a deadly disease. We understand that great suffering has been wrought by it, in addition to the death toll, however you tally it. People are suffering long-term health effects from SARS-CoV-2. Some of that suffering is directly from the health effects related to SARS-CoV-2. Some of that suffering is coming from the medical professionals that have had a very different, close-up, and personal experience of the crisis. In a sense, it is clear to me that the reality of the medical professionals that have been on the front lines is magnitudes different than the experience of the general public. Some of the suffering is from acute anxiety in the general population over what might happen and the implications of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. We know that the economic wreckage from the lockdown isn't just about money. It's about the marginalized and poor having their very existence threatened. They are experiencing survival anxiety on steroids. There is suffering that is emotional and psychological from the unprecedented social isolation imposed on people across the world. We know there is a spike in spousal abuse, child abuse, alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide, and a myriad of damaging circumstances unforeseen by the architects of the lockdowns, and is largely unseen at present by those not suffering. We know there is suffering in the hearts of the highly empathetic and compassionate among us who are impacted by all the compounded suffering happening around us. We know that there is an unfortunate intersection of anxiety and trauma in relation to this virus that is having an explosive reaction with the heightened political anxiety and trauma that has been building towards November. It's an inflammatory condition on many, many levels. The folks that complained about last week's show seem to have interpreted that our view of the mask policy was that it was dumb and wrong. We want to be very clear on this issue. What we talked about last week, and almost every week since we started talking about this issue, is that we think the nature of the debate over masks has been counterproductive and unnecessarily political. That is a very different thing
Than saying masks don't matter.
We are not for or against masks. And I know that may be hard for people that feel like you have to take a side. We have stated biases on the mandate issues from the research that we've done, but these biases are not political biases, which appears to be the root of the complaints that we are not political enough for people with particular political biases. We are for facilitating productive dialogue on an important issue. That, it seems, puts us in a very small and occluded media minority, a minority that the station manager has now suppressed with autocratic censorship. We do not claim to know what is going on, to know the answer to the big questions. We do spend hours researching the big questions each week to inform and educate ourselves and our listeners. Ainsley has done the work to multiply the platforms that our live show is broadcast on in order to provide listeners with avenues to provide us with feedback on our show, which we ask for from our audience multiple times each week. We have been broadcasting live on KBMF, Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube simultaneously. No other radio show on KBMF has made themselves so available to instant feedback and criticism from our listening audience. We are asking big, important questions on the salient issues of the day and asking our audience for their sources of information, their expertise, experience, and critical feedback. This censorship essentially hobbled the agnostic basis for the show, rendering it pointless. It disallows us from doing critical analysis from mainstream news sources such as the New York Times, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, MSNBC, CNN, local affiliates across the country of NBC, ABC, CBS, The Guardian, The Independent UK, Scientific American, the Journal of American Medical Association. Here's the rub. Most of those sources have both critical views and positive views of the reaction to this incredibly important health issue. Governmental policy must be questioned. It would be a dereliction of duty for us not to do it. There is no settled science on SARS-CoV-2 in regard to the cost-benefit ratio of what the nations and countries are doing. We don't know what really works. We will not be able to fully understand those things in depth until a year or so passes. Censoring our attempts to understand and share our understanding is the opposite of education and social justice, which is the founding principles of this radio station, KBMF. In order to preserve our integrity and the integrity of the show, we decided to comply with the censorship by not questioning government mandates, and in the place of our regular live show on the radio, we have produced a performance piece on the dangers of censorship.
Quotes and crickets.
This is the intro. If there's any comments or anybody wants to say anything at this point, if anybody wants to comment on that, we do have another piece prepared, which is a piece I will be delivering to the Butte America Foundation Board, which is the nonprofit over the station, to try to address this injustice that has occurred over the censorship of this show, which I am prepared to read now,
and
or
it's
whenever.
not even just injustice. I mean, it's like, if you want the too long didn't read version, the too long didn't read version is the station manager said, you can't share that data on the radio, and you can't tell anybody that I told you not to share that data on the radio. And that sets a horrific precedent for news, for KBMF as a community platform, it's just a horrific precedent. Censorship is a horrific precedent. I understand. This is 710 and 805 says, holy cow, y'all. Yeah. So he brought us into the station and had listened to our show from Sunday, but I don't think he's listened to any of our other shows recently.
Or didn't understand what the intent of the show was, which I think we're very clear with.
The problem is we can't be every single show or even every half hour of every show.
Which reminds me, we should play a disclaimer.
I need to play another one of those disclaimers. We can't always be saying why we're here. It's 2 hours and somebody might pop into the show at some point where we're making a joke about how inconsistent it is that people have to wear masks but they don't have to wear them over their noses, or that Walmart has closed one of the doors, or that it's totally okay for you to wear a piece of cloth that you wash every few days. But that's not going to help protect you from forest fire particulate. You should really wear a real mask to protect you from forest fire particulate, but it will protect you from the virus. I mean, we're sharing information from the CDC, and unfortunately, like I said, someone might tune in when we're sharing a joke or when we're being frustrated, because we are humans. It's infotainment. It's meta news. We're not completely journalistically just sharing data, but unfortunately, even if we were just sharing data after this meeting with the station manager on Friday, we are not allowed to share any data from any sources that people might interpret to contradict Butte Silverbow's governmental mandates about mask wearing and social distancing benefits. And we cannot tell anybody on KBMF that we've been told we are not allowed to share data that contradicts the government mandates.
Let's let that sink in. Let's play the disclaimer so that everybody on the radio knows that our show about censorship, talking about the dangers of censorship, is not the opinion of this station.
That's funny, man.
Crank it.
This is a point of view program. The views expressed are those of the participants and not necessarily those of the station.
Okay.
Point of view show.
It's a point of view show.
We really need to put
We have
that
made
on.
no calls to action. We have violated no station rule. We have violated no FCC rule.
So I have my logical frontal lobe reaction to this, which is precedents are scary and should be entered into.
Thank you for supporting community radio by tuning in to 102.5 FM today.
Precedents are scary. They should be entered into with a lot of forethought and care. That's my frontal lobe reaction to being told, don't share that data that contradicts the government, and don't tell anybody that I told you not to share that data that contradicts the government. I also have a lot of like personal, like hindbrain animal reactions to that, which is, well then, in that case, that disclaimer better be played by anyone on KBMF who expresses any opinion on religion or politics, which I gotta say, a lot of KBMFers express opinions on politics all the time. But because most of the people that are on KBMF and most of the people that listen to KBMF have very similar opinions, it's not a problem. We've only recently, over the last couple of months, through our research, started sharing data that counteracts or doesn't quite match up with the mainstream opinion of KBMF's DJs and most of its listeners.
Boyce Brown did comment and wanted to talk about, he mentioned that the First Amendment, which we're going to get to, because KBMF is not a First Amendment platform.
And neither is Facebook. Facebook can censor whatever it wants,
Yeah.
and we all agreed to that when we signed the user agreement.
The First Amendment does not apply to this radio station or anybody who is using the radio station. FCC regulation automatically truncates
First Amendment
rights.
You are allowed to say fuck.
God. We're not on the radio.
But you're not allowed to say it while you're on air on a community radio station.
Right.
Which is why we have those sorts of reactions.
This is why we have those reactions.
You know, Dark's a founding member of KBMF. He's been playing by these rules for over 5 years now.
It's in the blood.
Yeah, I get freaky when I hear people say those words in songs on my Spotify.
So there is another piece that I prepared that is the official piece, and I think part of the critical feedback that we've been receiving in the last few weeks is that we are not doctors, we are not professors, we are not public health officials, we are not authorities in politics.
All of which are true.
We are not, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
I don't have a tie. I don't have a strongly held conviction even about the things that we're talking about. I don't have a title to tell you why you should listen to me.
Sir Dark Sevier.
So what I have done is I have gathered some quotes. These are the quotes that are going out live on our radio station right now to remind people about the importance of not censoring anybody or anything. So
710 and 805 says, this makes me feel glad that I'm just playing greasy bass tunes as a show.
Right.
And didn't decide to do any segments on cannabis after all.
I got a quote for that.
He was going to be doing educational, data-driven segments on cannabis, which probably actually would have been fine on KBMF because most Republicans and Libertarians don't listen to us because it's a super, super blue-leaning station.
Right. So what I've done...
Been fine.
What I've done to edify the statement that I am making to the board to talk about the incorrectness of this censorship is that I have peppered it with quotes from people who do have ties, titles, or strongly held convictions, literary giants, politicians, founding fathers,
Ray Bradbury,
artists, etc., etc.,
Benjamin
etc.
Franklin.
So I'm going to break up my writing to show you how it correlates. It is co-relative to the thoughts of the greats of our culture and the world culture. So I'll start there, shall I?
And please, if you have thoughts, here, look, there are some
Yes,
people,
please keep commenting
there
online.
are some people listening right now who don't have the same opinions that we have and don't like a lot of the data that we share. And I really want to hear from those people. 12 people messaged Clark about our radio show on Sunday and did not message us, even though we're always saying, please
contact us. Yeah.
If you don't like this data or you have conflicting data or you have a better information source, send it to us. We're saying it all the time. That's why we have the fucking Facebook ad running all the time.
Yeah.
Because we want to talk to people. We want to have difficult conversations. It's been a little bit hard with all the coronavirus quarantines.
And we're going to warn you right now, if you have children in the room, protect them, hide them, or go somewhere else because we may use some salty language.
But most people are pretty okay with that these days. It only used to be a thing that was censored.
Think of the children.
Yeah. Anyway, we're a little salty because we love KBMF. We're also salty because this action to double censor information on a public radio station is dangerous and scary, and we're a little salty because we care. I don't know.
Okay, so
but we
yes.
also care.
Do you want to go? Is there something in there you want to talk about?
I just wanted to say that 12 people messaged Clark about our radio show,
Right.
and he said that we knew all of them.
Yeah,
And we don't know who you are, so your
we don't know
were
who
in
complained,
confidence.
but it's all people that are familiar. They're regular characters.
It's not like it's some rando in Butte that turned on KBMF and heard us say something and didn't like it. These are people that know us that could have come to us and had a conversation with us.
So since I'm just an Okie college dropout, I'm going to bolster my arguments with the greats. So I'll start off with a quote
Because you're not a doctor.
I'm not a doctor.
Which we never
Who am I
said-
to have an opinion?
We never said we were doctors, but we were sharing data from doctors.
Sharing data from doctors, I guess that's not right. Anyway, I'm going to start off with a quote from Mark Twain. Some of you may have heard of him. Censorship is telling a man he can't have a steak just because a baby can't chew it.
Wow, jumping right in there.
That's the opening quote. This is now my words. The station
Which
manager.
is another thing we were told.
I will go back and forth.
Yep. We're
The
going to let you
station,
know.
the station manager has made a determination to censor this show. The decision was not based on any one specific thing that we did as hosts, but on a dozen or so complaints and the issues the station manager himself have noted. The main complaint I have heard from the station manager and listeners concerning our show from Sunday, September 30th, is August 30th, is not about any specific rule or agreement being broken, but an abstract feeling, a notion that other people's interpretation of our show might be dangerous to the community. The irony of this censorship decision is that a loud vocal minority has misinterpreted the content of our show and have now recklessly endangered it and put the integrity of KBMF in jeopardy in the process.
It's a strong statement.
It is a strong statement, and I will go and read something from somebody smart. Henry Louis Gates Jr. says, censorship is to art as lynching is to justice. And I'll go further with another smart guy, George Bernard Shaw.
Oh, I thought George Bernard Shaw was a woman.
George Bernard Shaw.
Wasn't George Bernard Shaw? No, maybe I'm thinking of another author that took a guy's name as her pseudonym.
Well, I won't be binary. This human,
This person,
named George Bernard Shaw. All censorships exist to prevent anyone from challenging current conceptions and existing institutions. All progress is initiated by challenging current conceptions and executed by supplanting existing institutions. Consequently, the first condition of progress is the removal of censorship. Not my words, George Bernard Shaw's.
Bernard Sure.
These are now my words.
It's important to designate.
The degree of censorship employed on Friday should be disturbing to any rational person that is seriously concerned about the integrity of KBMF as a community access platform. The first degree of censorship is this. The hosts of Post-Orthodoxy have been ordered not to talk about any data, no matter the source or veracity, that puts government mandates related to SARS-CoV-2 into question. In other words, the station manager just asked us not to question the government under threat of losing the broadcast privileges for Post-Orthodoxy, a show that was created to challenge orthodoxies, fundamentalisms, cult behavior, and closely held beliefs. The second degree of censorship was the one that we found most disturbing. We were told not to discuss on air why we were censored.
We could have worked with... Is it okay if I interrupt you?
Or what we were censored from talking about.
Right. Which is why we're currently playing a bunch of lovely quotes about censorship on KBMF on air and having this conversation with you guys on the side.
Correct. In other words, we were told to shut up and not to talk about being told to shut up. If you are a member of this station, this has serious implications for you directly. If you support this station in any way, this is something you should be made aware of. The mission statement for KBMF, the KBMF endeavor, was centered on social justice and education. It was the stated reason for the station coming into existence and the main reason We support and work to develop this important, non-commercially controlled community asset. And I'll go to Salman Rushdie. He's a noted guy that's dealt with some censorship before. Salman Rushdie says, free societies are societies in motion. And with motion comes tension, dissent, and friction. Free people strike sparks, and those sparks are the best evidence of freedom's existence. Salman
Freedom is a
Rushdie.
flame.
Back to my words.
Dark Sevier.
Just a regular guy's words. Ainsley and I came to Friday's meeting prepared to listen to critical feedback and make adjustments to best serve our local listening audience, the mission of the show, and KBMF. We could have quelled some of the upset very easily without having the future of the Post-Orthodoxy radio show threatened. The autocratic, non-negotiable response was shocking and profoundly disturbing. Rather than being intimidated and censored, we have chosen not to lie to our audience through omission, which was requested by the station manager. But instead, we have decided to pause this show until the matter can be better resolved.
At least pause it on KBMF. We're going to take a couple weeks off. We said we were going to do a show on local politics. We have a listener who requested a show on local politics.
Thanks for
Jay
tuning in.
Hillius. Several people have put a sticker in for us to talk about aliens, and we have a couple of people lined up to hopefully do aliens interviews with. And if you have any topics that you want to talk about, things you're not supposed to ask questions about, let us know, because we're going to be preparing and ramping up for season 2, whether we're podcasting from home or we find a way to
alleviate this block in the road to free expression.
Yeah.
This might be a good time to talk about the GoFundMe that you put up, because we will no longer be using we won't be using these studio facilities, this community platform.
Yeah.
We will need some gear at home to continue doing the work that we are doing.
And according to my research today, it's really easy to get this like $20 Chinese version of a $99 microphone that does a great job if you're not trying to be Joe Rogan.
We need microphones, we need some equipment, we need some lighting. This is what we're looking for.
We want to be able to put out a quality show and turn it into a podcast people can listen to on the road, and we want to be able to do shows on things you can't talk about on community radio, like sex and drugs. We can talk about religion and politics all day on KBMF, as long as it's religion and politics that match what people who listen to KBMF think is acceptable.
Right.
We had a comment from a friend of ours this week while we were trying to hash out what the heck was going on. Who said, I thought you were just going to bash how stupid religion is, and then you decided to go after the Democratic Party. And it's like, no, we weren't bashing religion, and we weren't calling religion stupid. We're talking about the parts of those things that inhibit people's mental liberties, and the parts of those things that hold people back from free self-expression, and the parts of religion that are dangerous in society historically. We weren't saying religion is stupid, but unfortunately we went from religion to this person's personal sacred cow, which is politics, and we started saying things politically that this person didn't like.
Eric Althoff said, tell us where to donate. So maybe you can repost, because I think that was in the last video. If you can repost a link to our GoFundMe site, we are looking for some help to continue doing the work that we are doing. I would like to go back to the statement that we're going to deliver to the board to see if we can resolve this situation in some satisfactory way.
Tips. Kevin Olson says, really shouldn't censor.
Shouldn't censor.
As information, good and bad, true or false, is simply information. People should be able to take in information and investigate for themselves. I think the fear was from the 12 friends of ours who decided to talk to the station manager instead of us, and the station manager's fear himself, as well as the people who are influencing his position, is that people who aren't as smart might interpret what we're saying dangerously. So unfortunately, Kevin, maybe we should protect people from information.
Well, we need to protect people from our information, apparently.
This information.
Because this information, some people feel they need to be protected from it.
Well, and I just want to point out...
But they put it off that somebody else might do something crazy with it.
So,
but instead, what they want to do is violate journalistic, artistic, freedom of expression standards.
I get... SARS-CoV-2 is a big deal. It's a pandemic. There are millions and millions and millions of people infected with it. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. Hundreds of thousands of people have lost work because of being ill. It's really serious. Sometimes the right kind of mask actually helps someone. Social distancing is proven to be way more important, according to the data, than wearing a mask. A lot of the times when people wear a mask, they don't keep their distance like they should. You know, like we've always been saying, we want our loved ones to take care of themselves and do what they need to do to be
protect
safe.
themselves.
And we're sharing data to try to support that aim, which is not everybody wear a mask all the time. It's how do we help our friends who can't leave the house because they have an autoimmune disease get groceries.
We have consistently been talking about the one-size-fits-all approach is dangerous, and it leaves the most vulnerable among us and the most vulnerable to this disease out of the dialogue. We should be focusing on the people who are most affected. And we're not looking at the data that shows us that. But that's a sidebar. And that's
Right.
actually for another show.
Well, and I wanted to...
Because I want to finish this letter.
I want
but-
you to finish
yeah.
that letter too, but I wanted to point out that a big problem with us sharing any data or news or information that contradicts the mainstream government mandates and data is that it's only what a particular part of the country thinks is the right data. For instance, there are many conservative radio stations that spend a lot of their airwaves talking about how dangerous the homosexual lifestyle is.
Yes.
And those radio stations feel that it is not appropriate or safe for anybody on their radio stations to talk about how it's okay to be gay, it's healthy to be gay, you should be yourself, gay marriage is not dangerous. Because according to that large percentage of the country's belief systems, there is only one safe way to be married, and that is heterosexually for life. And
Sidebar.
as a contrast, I just want to put that in
Yeah.
as a contrast.
Yeah.
That this kind of censorship comes up often, but it is a problem when people step outside of the bubble of belief system of the radio station that they're using. So back to you, Dark.
So I have another quote here. It's not from me. I'm just a regular old guy, college dropout from Oklahoma. But these folks are an organization that some of you may have heard of called the United Nations.
So saucy.
Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of the frontiers. I'll go back to just little old me. I'm going to talk about my humble perspective. I'm going to go back into the statement that we are delivering to the Butte America Foundation. The station manager has the option to terminate our privilege to broadcast from KBMF studio at any time without explanation. I strongly feel that it would be in the interest of the station and the community it serves to review this policy of censorship. However, KBMF is no more a free speech platform than Facebook is. Sarcasm can bring censorship by the Facebook AI as hate speech. And non-establishment or unpopular views can result in termination from KBMF by the station manager with zero recourse.
There is nothing in the station bylaws or the Butte America Foundation bylaws for officially opening any kind of complaint or response to a review.
I will now read from a politician. Not my words. A dead politician. We are not afraid to entrust the American people with unpleasant facts, foreign ideas, alien philosophies, and competitive values. For a nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is a nation that is afraid of its people. John F. Kennedy. Back to my words. One cannot rectify rationalizing censorship of this degree with social justice and education. They are incompatible. Telling a KBMF DJ that they are not allowed to express an unpopular point of view should be concerning to everyone on this platform and the greater community.
Every DJ should be worried about what is going to be unacceptable next.
Telling us not to reveal that we were censored is a horrific precedent. Your point of view might be unpopular with the next station manager.
We came into the meeting already prepared with our previous work on wanting to mitigate our tones, wanting to make sure that our confidence doesn't come across as hatefulness or arrogance, and wanting to make sure that we keep growing Post-Orthodoxy according to the comments from our listeners to be a more in service of the listeners show. And we were prepared for the station manager to say that he was uncomfortable with us talking about SARS-CoV-2.
Or write us up.
Or even
for
give us
some
a
reason.
write-up.
Or
for
give us
some
an
specific
actual reason. Yeah.
However, he said you can't say anything about SARS-CoV-2 that contradicts what the government says is right, which is weird coming from this station and him in particular. And we were like, okay, that we can work with that. We can let people know.
We can work with that. We were willing to take that censorship
like,
to your degree. Yeah.
We'll let people know. I understand it's a big issue, and we have been talking about it because we want to alleviate suffering, but maybe it's just not the time, and we should just let people figure it out on their own. And then he said, and you can't tell anybody that I told you to stop talking about it.
Well, he said, and don't tell it. I said, so I can talk about this censorship, and he goes, I would prefer you don't. It took us 4 clarifications for him to say, I said, is that your personal, or is that a station request? He says, I guess it's a station request.
Yep.
So the station asked us not to tell you, our audience, that they clammed us up.
Brian McGregory jumped on to say, but I know that you're being censored and you're saying that you're being censored, so there you go, breaking the rules again.
We are not breaking the rules because this is not the radio.
Yeah.
If you want to know what's going on the radio, we are totally in compliance with the request on the radio.
And let the station manager know ahead of time that we were going to comply with his request.
We let him know that we were complying with his request. We also let him know that we were going to be talking about this censorship on the internet and social media because it would be disingenuous of us and incorrect of us to shut up. It's wrong.
Well, it doesn't do with the integrity of our conversations, which is to try to have cognitive liberty conversations with people who are being shut down by various belief systems.
So we may be kicked off the radio station. We have not been kicked off the radio station.
Yeah.
This may be our last show. We are not going to do a show of our own accord until this censorship issue is resolved. And it may not get resolved, which is why we're doing this show, because everybody associated with this station and is concerned about censorship should know what is going on. It would be wrong. I would be a bad steward
I would be a
of
bad
radio.
DJ.
I would be a bad steward of this platform if I did not let people know what was happening behind closed doors here.
Mm-hmm. So we are actually following the rules. The station manager made it very clear that we were welcome to talk as much as we like about SARS-CoV-2 data that doesn't match the government's data on any other platform, just not on KBMF.
So I'd like to read a quote from our friend Salman Rushdie again.
Okay.
The moment you say that any idea system is sacred, whether it's a religious belief system or a secular ideology, the moment you declare a set of ideas to be immune from criticism, satire, derision, or contempt, freedom of thought becomes impossible.
Who is Salman Rushdie?
He's a writer. He wrote satanic verses, and the Islamic folk put a fatwa on him.
Oh, that means go kill that guy?
Yeah.
We have a couple of...
I have the very last couple of paragraphs.
All right, and then we'll get into things that people are bringing up in the comment section.
I have my closing, the end of this, and then one more quote from a scientific fella. My words. We are willing to do what we came into the Friday meeting intending to do. Hear the complaints. Assure the station manager that we take the issue seriously. And be sincere in making appropriate adjustments to mitigate future problems. We are not willing to accept this level of censorship without having the disturbing implications addressed in some kind of official or public way. It would be irresponsible of us to not do so for our radio station, our larger community, and the integrity of the work that we perform. And I'll close with a quote from a gentleman named Carl Sagan. Censoring knowledge, telling people what they must think and what ideas are impermissible, which lines of evidence may not be pursued, is the aperture to thought police and foolish and incompetent decision-making and long-term decline. This is the letter that I will be sending to the Butte America Foundation Board, and we will see if this
something to that effect
is addressed or not addressed.
I'm going to play another
disclaimer?
Another FYI.
Yeah, turn it up.
Control through the
after this quote.
false
Yeah.
needs. and how criticism of society is effectively and systematically suppressed by being infiltrated into institutions. They spoke of a closed technological society which creates a new totalitarianism, and in it there is no place for those outside the process of production. About the fact that the only way out of the comfortable, rationalized, undemocratic freedom offered by developed industrial civilization is through rebellion. About the fact that revolution is possible only through awareness, but that awareness in itself demands revolution. Das da Drinnick.
This is a point of view program. The views expressed are those of the participants and not necessarily those of the station.
Thank you, Station Manager.
It's kind of ironic, actually.
Yeah.
Like,
Astrid said, but why the censorship? Follow the money? Who benefits from it? I don't think it has anything to do with money, unfortunately. It might have something to do with money. We might have people who support this radio station that have threatened to withdraw their support.
that's quite possible.
So it might have something to do with money. But,
I bet I've seen those people at a bar over the last 3 months.
yeah.
So
We
that's
have other
pretty
questions going on
inconsistent.
here?
Well, I'm just thinking, like, so worst case scenario for the radio station, maybe it was even somebody who really has been staying home and following all of the government health mandates for the last 6 months, who supports the station, called in and said, I don't like that data. It doesn't match what the government says is safe, and it's unsafe for you to let people say those things. We need to trust the experts, and I'll pull my money. Maybe that happened.
It's possible.
That's possible. But I think more likely it's just an opinion problem. It's a popularity problem.
It's a political problem, in my opinion.
Disguised, it's a political problem. KBMF is super blue. The DJs are all mostly blue.
I am not Democrat. I am not Republican.
The
I am an
listeners
independent
are all
person.
mostly blue. We've had complaints from libertarians and Republicans in Butte who are like, you want us to get involved and support your radio station, but it's just talking against all of my belief systems all the time. So why would I get involved in a radio station that is so obviously of a particular political alignment? And it is according to, I mean, if you step outside whatever your political identity is for a minute, it's very easy to see that red folks in the U.S. favor sensible health measures that don't castrate society or the economy or children being able to go to school. And it's very easy
Generally
to see.
speaking.
Generally speaking, most red people are in favor of those sorts of things. They care about the cost-benefit analysis, how many people are going to die because of the lockdown, but not because of SARS-CoV-2. And then generally the blue team in the U.S. is generally in favor of follow what the government says, which is actually really ironic and funny, but follow what the government says, stay home, wear masks, be safe, protect. No amount of money or lack of social interaction is worth our health or our lives. And that's just, you can just see that everywhere. You can see it in the blue and red news sources. You can see it in the blue and red conversations on Facebook if you're still following anyone who disagrees with you. And so, unfortunately, in this case, KBMF is very blue-leaning, and therefore, after months of talking about how the Democratic Party needs some tune-ups, which people didn't like also, because we're just supposed to vote blue no matter who.
Which is a fascist trope. Sorry.
Right. And then, so after months of us discussing that during Bernie Sanders' campaign, which I know alienated several people who just want to make sure you're going to vote against Trump in November, and when we modulated our coronavirus conversations to follow the data and to follow the suffering. And the suffering and the data were all pointing that while it is a very serious virus that has very bad health risks for some people, the cost-benefit ratio of shutting everything down until we have a vaccine 2 years from now is probably going to do more harm than good. And that's just what the data's saying. And so I think over the last few months, we've made several people mad because what we're saying goes against the blue story. Unfortunately.
It's political. We've been saying
unfortunate.
over and over that a medical issue has become unnecessarily political, and the dialogues around the issue have become, for example, just mask up.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Why can't you just do it?
That, to me, is off-putting to people who have a more nuanced approach. It is unnecessarily divisive, and it's not consistent with good science or medicine. So you can say, let's examine our mask policy and find the best way to do it for the health of the most people. We could do that.
Yeah.
But you can't have that dialogue because they assume, when you start to get nuanced, they assume that you are coming from
be on
the
other
opposite
team,
side.
Because certain
This
people,
is how dumb we have become.
and we're not calling our friends dumb.
I'm not calling my friends dumb.
But
I'm saying
societally, with this,
the arguments have become
with
dumb.
this super team-oriented fighting, it's not discussing. It's just, do you say all the things that match my team? Because if you don't say all the things that match my team, you must be on the other team. There are only two options, and therefore you are my enemy. And we're saying there's way more than two options in this world, and we're trying to find them so that we can have cognitive liberty and alleviate suffering. Astrid says, in Sweden, it is not a left-right issue at all. We have diverse opinions about SARS-CoV-2, but it does not follow political opinions.
There's a long post from friend of the show. Are we saying names? I guess we're talking to the platform where
This is
they're
a public platform.
identifying themselves. Brian McGregory says, I do think you have misstated the sanction from KBMF. This is kind of a yelling fire in crowded theater situation, an example of the limits of free speech. Furthermore, the station's actions don't deny your free speech rights. They just deny you this particular venue, which is their right, and I'm sure they feel their duty too. If I write a book and think it's the greatest thing since War and Peace, that doesn't mean I can demand that Doubleday publish it because of my free speech rights, something you just horror.
Yeah, well...
We never said that this was a free speech right.
Yeah, this isn't a free speech problem, this is a censorship problem. Censorship and free speech are related, but they're not completely exclusive to each other. We said at the beginning of the show, which maybe Bryant wasn't here for...
We said it a couple places in the show.
KBMF does not guarantee you free speech. FCC already limits swear words and topics of conversation from... You can't talk about sex on KBMF. And Facebook is not a free speech platform, nor is Twitter. So when you sign a user agreement with a social media platform...
You give up your free speech rights.
You give up your free speech rights. So we know that already. We're not talking about our free speech. We're talking about how dangerous it is to censor information and then tell people you can't tell anybody that you've been censored.
I will address the fire in the theater issue. I have thought a lot about this.
Yeah.
The idea of your free speech being limited, hate speech is limited for certain reasons. Causing panic is a problem. Mm-hmm. That is why you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. Because people may panic, stampede each other.
Right.
We are not doing that, and that is not a loophole. We are not calling to action. We are not endorsing a policy. We are examining data.
And we're sharing
some data we like, some data we don't like.
As humans.
It's not endorsement of data.
No.
We are looking at sources, some you know, some you do not know. And we are asking for sources that we do not know from our listening audience that can help us better understand the situation. We are not here to prove anything. We are not here to make a stand. I don't have a conviction that this is this way or that is that way.
Well,
we are here to examine the data.
And as Astrid said, follow the money. I feel as though the 12 or so friends of ours who decided to talk to the station manager instead of talking to us, maybe they think we have some sort of agenda or we're getting something out. Even if it's just we get off on being controversial.
The point of our show is Post-Orthodoxy.
Get beyond the things that you're not supposed to ask questions about.
If you want to know who controls you,
just look at who you're not allowed to question.
That is a phrase, probably by a smart person.
Yeah. I don't remember.
If you want to know who controls you, look at who you're not allowed to question. That is the point of the show. We
have some good comments from Boyce Brown.
Oh, good.
About the First Amendment and
fire
in a crowded theater.
Okay.
The First Amendment is, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That is, the U.S. government is not allowed to do any of those things.
Right. This radio station is allowed.
From the FCC. The FCC is barred by law from trying to prevent the broadcast of any point of view. The Communications Act prohibits the FCC from censoring broadcast material in most cases and from making any regulation that would interfere with freedom of speech. Expressions of views that do not involve a clear and present danger of serious substantive evil come under the protection of the Constitution, which guarantees freedom and speech and freedom of the press and prevents suppression of these expressions by the FCC. Maybe we should lodge a complaint with the FCC.
Well, we can't lodge a complaint with the FCC. I mean, maybe we could lodge a complaint.
Let me finish Boyce's comment.
Please do.
Yeah. So Boyce himself. So that was Congress and the FCC, which are two different organizations. The KBMF is another different organization. The phrase, "you can't yell fire in a crowded theater," sounds like a reasonable limitation to free speech. However, few people know that that quote comes from Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes in the case Abrams versus the United States, 1919. A case about pamphlets thrown out of the window of a building in New York City in opposition to America sending troops to Soviet Russia. So what sounds like a reasonable limitation to free speech is actually lawfare against anti-militarism. More people need to know that.
Oh, that's a good point.
So "you can't yell fire in a crowded theater" was used to censor people who were trying to spread information that maybe we shouldn't go to war with Soviet Russia.
That is some context that I think is important
That's
to hear.
beautiful.
Thank you, Boyce Brown.
Wow, thank you, Boyce. He says his favorite censorship quote is Milton from the Areopagitica. Areopagitica. I'm sure I'm doing that Greek. Nope. "Let truth and falsehood grapple. Who ever knew truth put to the worst in a free and open encounter?" So for the olden times translation, if truth is really truth and it's out there grappling with falsehoods, truth is going to win.
That should be the case.
Yeah.
So, any other comments there? Brian McGregory said, we have to keep looking for a platform willing to host us, and another soapbox, if you will. Good luck. So, he's assuming that this censorship ban will stand up, and apparently he endorses the ban. He's endorsing the censorship, I guess.
I'm under
Are you endorsing the censorship, Brian McGregory?
Yeah, you think KBMF should tell DJs they're not allowed to talk about certain topics, especially when it counteracts what the government says is right. Yeah. And they're not allowed to tell the listening audience that they've been censored.
Because if you're saying that, you're saying that all these quotes that we've been reading, the quotes that we're airing on the radio station right now by some of the greats of the human endeavor, they're all incorrect.
Kevin Olson says, "Diplomacy, noun, the patriotic act of lying for one's country." Ambrose Bierce, The Devil's Dictionary.
Dang.
Diplomacy.
Yeah.
The patriotic act of lying for one's country.
Sounds about right.
Fascinating.
You can use diplomacy in other factors, but I think in that factor that's totally
of course
resonates.
Eric
to
Althoff
me.
says, "If you don't piss anyone off, you're not doing free speech right."
I feel like I feel disturbed that this occurrence happened.
Especially because you've been with KBMF since before it even started, and you know the mission statements that were set forth by the station manager.
I find it really disappointing, and I also have compassion for all the people who are most upset. I have complete compassion because I am aware that what is happening in the culture of our country right now is I've never witnessed this level of anxiety, trauma, and panic.
About politics.
About politics, which is being exacerbated by anxiety and trauma and panic concerning this virus, and they have become conflated into some cocktail that is searing off people's cognitive calmness.
We can't even talk about it because we just have to survive until November, and if Trump gets reelected, I
find it ironic. So the main complaint, from what I understand, is people were concerned that we would be misinterpreted and then suddenly people would run around without masks and we would
And
all
that
die.
would kill people.
And that would kill people.
I mean, I want to honor that. I want
Yeah.
to honor that because I understand that perspective. I came from a super conservative perspective where thousands and thousands of people really thought that being gay is bad for you. I do not think being gay is bad for you. However, I can still remember what it felt like to believe that being gay was unhealthy. It wasn't just offensive, it wasn't just annoying, it wasn't just weird. Thousands and thousands of evangelical Christians in the US believe one in four citizens of the US are evangelicals. And
Are evangelicals.
Evangelicals
70% of Americans identify as Judeo-Christian.
some kind of Christian. And some Christians are very inclusive of LGBTQ+. However, 1 in 4 of the citizens of the U.S. are evangelical Christians, which by and large, by their statements of belief on their websites of their churches, believe that being gay is unhealthy for you, dangerous for society. And I remember what it felt like to believe that that was the way the universe is. I have gotten out of that reality bubble into a new reality where I have different perspectives and different information and a different belief system. So I can have compassion for my loved ones and my friends who truly believe if we say something that might convince, if we share data that shows that it doesn't matter whether a country did lockdowns and masks or not, the same percentage of the population was affected by the virus, that might really kill people. I have compassion for that.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like to believe something so strongly that there is no other possibility. I live in a place that's full of possibility now. I'm not really attached to data. I'm not really attached to belief systems. I have a much, much, much smaller code of personal ethics than I did back when it was the 10 Commandments and what Jesus said and what R.C. Sproul said and what C.S. Lewis said. And now I just have a very simple code of ethics, which is be yourself and do no harm. Those two things are plenty of enough challenge for one lifetime. I do remember what it's like to have a very complex and strict worldview.
Yes, I have complete compassion for that. I sometimes forget where the gap is because I know that when you're operating on a fundamentalist perspective, there's no gray area and there's no middle ground. So
no,
it's
there's
very.
only right
I
or
lived
wrong.
that way.
There's
I
only
lived
right
that
or
way.
wrong.
So I have compassion for that state. I have been out of that perspective longer than you have.
Yeah.
You tend to be quicker to qualify your statements and to be kind to people who are still struggling. Or, for some people, it's not a struggle. It's very easy. It's an easier way to negotiate the world.
Oh, it's
this is
much
good.
easier.
This is bad. It's
Yeah.
a more complex way to negotiate the world, to have to deal with paradox, shades of gray, non-binary thinking.
Maybe what works for you isn't healthy for someone else.
So I'd like to, can I read a little piece?
Yeah, baby.
This is another little piece that I prepared for the show because I think it's important for folks who are binary, who have a strongly held belief or conviction around this virus. So I want to share my perception of what narratives are running in this country right now. It's increasingly, now I'm just a regular guy. This is not an expert that's doing this. This is not a doctor's words. This is just me reading something that I wrote. It's increasingly obvious to me that there are multiple narratives in the U.S. concerning SARS-CoV-2. These individual storylines are reality shapers, and the emotions evoked by those narratives are their fuel. One narrative, now I'm going to lay out two narratives. What I'm saying here is not what I think is happening.
These are two stories.
These are two narratives. These are two
Belief systems
that are running simultaneously. I do not believe in either one of these systems. Take note. First narrative. SARS-CoV-2 is a deadly pandemic that we must somehow fight, and that increasing positive tests equate to an increasing or ongoing threat to everyone. A vaccine is a possible end to the danger, and the risks of taking one, even if that vaccine has not been through proper trials, is worth trying because of the danger that they feel. This seems to be the most popular narrative for the citizens that trust and rely on mainstream, corporately funded news and information sources. An extreme of this narrative promotes a mandatory vaccine for everyone on the planet, even if it has not been through proper trials. That is one perspective. And there are shades of that perspective.
Right. But in general, millions of people think it's super dangerous. We absolutely must do what the government tells us.
They think that we must stop the spread of the virus into the general population, which, from what I understand, has already happened. That's why we're testing people who are not sick. There is another narrative out there, and if it's not your narrative, you may think it's wrong. But it doesn't mean that it's not happening, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect your life.
Right. Millions of people believe this way about reality.
Here is another narrative that I have isolated. One narrative is that the potential danger of SARS-CoV-2 was overstated, and that the state and federal authorities overreacted, causing more personal and social harm than good. SARS-CoV-2 will turn out to be deadly, but not more deadly than a strong flu. Known risk groups should be protected, and the less vulnerable should be left to carry on normally. An extreme of this narrative believes that this is socially engineered chaos, that it is politically motivated, and that the SARS-CoV-2 was just a convenient pretext for techno-fascists to permanently enslave humanity. That is another largely held narrative. Those narratives are so far apart in terms of actually being able to have a productive conversation between the two, and the emotions that are growing between those two narratives is how blood gets spilled. Because something, the thing I think that was most inciting last week is I said, if after the virus has passed, the threat and the pandemic level of it has passed, and it's just a virus and some people get it, once that has passed, if it turns out that good, reliable data comes out that said that the mask policy was not very useful in stopping the spread of the virus, then there is going to be crowing from people on the right that are going to make fun of people on the left for believing it. And those people that have that position, that masks are stupid, may not have the right information for that decision. It might be a political party line feeling.
They might have said masks are stupid because they're Republicans, and that's what you say when you're a Republican.
They might say that masks are stupid because Democrats told them to wear one.
Right.
So the hypothetical that I passed out, that I threw out last week was, if this is a hypothetical situation, if that data comes out, that the mask did very little and the lockdowns did very little.
And were in fact harmful.
Which there is data saying that, but we don't know how it all shakes out.
Right.
If there is data saying that, then the people on the left who have cursed, unfriended, shamed, derided, insulted people who had a perspective that, whether or not they got the perspective correctly, was the correct perspective, are we going to double down on calling them bad names? Or are we going to have a moment of reflection and say, I think we've become too divisive in this country and we can't keep attacking our neighbors? Many of the other narratives floating around are shades of the previous two. There are more obscure theories with even more dire and sinister tones, but I will not deal with that so much here. That's for another show. We can bring in the aliens if we want to.
Yeah, 710 and 805 is really excited about our alien show.
In my opinion, there is grave danger in thinking one's perspective is the one and only correct opinion. It otherizes people with differing views and dehumanizes our neighbors. Historically, when propaganda and ideology allow for disregarding the very humanity of people that do not share our orthodoxies, killing each other becomes rational. Censorship paves the way to that reality. The issue is not about us. It's not about our show. It's not about whether we'll do this show or we won't do this show. The issue is that censorship is fucking dangerous. And as we're dealing with that, we would like to share how we think how fucking dangerous it is. So we are saying this as our goodbye until maybe there are some cooler heads, some less panicked and traumatized heads, politically driven heads on the board of the Butte America Foundation that might see that this is a dangerous precedent for this organization and for the people in this community trying to find alternative information to corporate dictated information.
Democrats don't have all the best ideas, and Republicans don't have all the worst ideas. And this is only one country on the whole planet. There are a lot of people on the planet with ideas that are different from blue no matter who ideas. That doesn't mean that they're all wrong. Millions and millions and billions of people who are not Democrats. We're not anti-Democrat, and we're not pro-Republican. We're not anti or pro anything. We have opinions, and sometimes those opinions change based on the data.
They change often.
Often, and based on people who take the time to have the dignity to message us directly and let us know that they have a problem with what we're saying. And we really appreciate all of those people who are tuning in today.
There are people who did comment on the DJ. We have a special page on Facebook, which is about, it's just for DJs on the station.
Anybody who's a DJ is part of this group, and we can all socialize with each other.
And people who I consider friends turned completely hostile. In that, I was not hostile in that.
Mm-mm.
I kept trying to figure out where the hostility was coming from, but apparently there was some grumblings going on. There was some hissing happening that I was not privy to. And they didn't do what I think a good friend should do, if indeed we are friends, which is to have a conversation with us and see if what they thought we said was what we actually said. Because we cannot be responsible for people's interpretations of what we're saying. When there is a binary mindset where it is left and right or right and wrong, what we're doing is prone to miscommunication all the time. But that's not our problem. I would like to mitigate that by qualifying my statements more clearly. And if people say that I was not clarifying things enough, or if they thought that I was saying something, the thing to do as a friend is to say, hey, that doesn't sound like who I think you are.
Right.
And then they might find that they are correct.
Hey, friend, it sounds like you're saying you don't care about people's lives.
Yeah.
Why would you say that? And then we could say, whoa, we totally do care about people's lives. And we've been spending the past 6 months looking for information on how to keep people safe, actually.
One friend that I talked to, I feel like we were able to at least understand that I am not passive about this. I don't get paid to do this show. We don't get paid to do this show. We spend days and hours a week. The only thing, the benefit of us doing this show is us feeling like we can serve the mission of the radio station, which is social justice and education.
Or at least it was.
It's written up that is the mission of the station, is social justice and education. This show, I consider a social justice and education program. And I don't think it's a stretch. We are educating ourselves and hoping to share that education and then have our audience then educate us if we are incorrect. That seems like a good community feedback to have.
710 and 805 says that it is sad when people consider a flexible and open mind as walking the fence.
Yes.
Kevin Olson says, arguing is about being right. Discussing is seeking for what is right.
I was trying to discuss and I was being argued with on the Facebook page. That was the problem.
Are you out to, what is it? Are you out to confirm your perspective or, I don't know.
Change your perspective.
I'm going to mess it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, doing the show.
There we go. Are you out to verify your perspectives or validate your perspectives? If you're trying to verify your perspectives, that means you're open to whatever information supports or does not support your perspectives. If you're just out to validate your perspectives, oftentimes that's a really tough protective place that people go to when they're experiencing trauma. I just need to know that I know what's going on in the universe and I can't accept any new information right now because I need to be safe. And that's me. I have compassion. I understand I used to be that way about new information too, because I was experiencing a lot of religious trauma. And validating my perspectives all the time. Instead of taking in any information that contradicted my perspectives. I was always only pulling in and looking for information that validated and strengthened my perspectives. Shannon Dustin tuned in. She says, orbs, actually it might be a guy named Shannon, I don't know. Orbs are a good place to start with the aliens conversation for season 2.
Yeah, season 2 will either be back here on the air on KBMF if this issue is resolved. If not, again, we're going to plug our GoFundMe page.
And thank you to Eric and Pia who have already donated.
What?
Yeah, we can buy microphones.
Really?
They already donated enough money for us to buy microphones, tripods, and cords for the microphones.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding.
Well, if you want to donate more, we could use a computer.
We would really love to be able to do radio shows about more controversial topics than we can do here on KBMF. It was already in the works to get some equipment so that we could do midweek shows and have guests from all over the world. We can't have a guest from all over the world here in KBMF in the station, but we would love to have guests from all over the world to talk about interesting topics and broadcast it live to you guys so we can have discussions like this about more than just what's going on in the U.S. right now.
Agreed. We there have been people offering to support our efforts on this show for a period of time. We tightened our belt and swallowed hard and threw down a chunk of change for a website, which is not up yet. We have a website under construction so that we can create a place for people to support us in an ongoing way. Instead of having to do a big push and say we need all this gear, to have $5 donations from a larger base of people so that we can do this work full time.
We want to build a community. It's hard. A lot of people don't leave strongly held belief systems like Democrats or Republicans or Christian. You don't leave those because you would lose your community. Like I lost my entire community when I was 27 and decided I couldn't do that thing anymore. I lost my whole community. It's really hard. That doesn't mean that we need to be community-less for the rest of our lives. We can build a community. Dark and I, one of our taglines for the show is an outpost in the borderlands. There are borderlands between strongly held belief systems, and we're setting up a trading post so that you're on your pathway to go and figure out what you believe about the universe, and you stop by the trading post and we're like, hey, that path has bears, that path does not have bears. FYI, you might try those mountains. I heard there's a spring there. You can get some fresh water. We want to create a community space, and we also want to be able to be supported in the work that we do so that we can do really cool things like go on the road and connect local news sources with actual citizens all over the world.
This is an extension of the vision of Prince Bozulu when he came to Butte, America through a KBMF relationship that I started back in 2016. And his idea was to create a global community radio network. I would still like to honor that vision and change it a little bit in terms of creating a global community media network.
Not just radio.
Radio, print, web, podcast, etc., etc., etc. Zines. Wherever people are distributing information.
Pamphlets thrown
on a
out
local
the window
basis,
of an upper story
because
building.
those people do not get supported financially often. Unless they find their people that will support them in the work. And so part of the effort to create this sort of global network of community media is so that people who are interested in community media can then network and support each other.
And we're not getting our news from somebody else who's been paid to tell us certain things.
Right.
Mainstream media is a joke. It's poisonous. Part of what we loved about KBMF is the ability to broadcast locally and worldwide through butteamericaradio.org and tell people what's really going on in this area.
We should do a disclaimer.
We should do a disclaimer, speaking of which.
I can pause this thing if you need
2
to.
hours or so to create their own brand of radio show. Sometimes music, sometimes talk radio.
We'll wait for this to be done.
The 4 to 6 p.m. slot every Sunday has been home to the Post-Orthodoxy show for the past year, and sadly, due to unforeseen circumstances, today is our last episode to air on KBMF for the foreseeable future. We have crafted this episode for your listening pleasure with thought-provoking quotes from history's best and brightest around the idea of censorship. If you're curious about what's going on, you're welcome to join us between now and 6 p.m. on our live stream at facebook.com/postorthodoxy, twitch.tv/theseviers, or Post-Orthodoxy on YouTube. where, as always, we look forward to your feedback and participation.
This is a point of view program. The views expressed are those of the participants and not necessarily those of the station.
Every time, man. Gosh,
Right.
I would have been happy to play a disclaimer like that every
Absolutely.
half hour. I would have been happy to play a disclaimer like that every 15 minutes. I know it's hard when you pop onto the radio and you're like, what the heck is being talked about on my good Christian radio station? Except it was my good Democrat radio station. You know, and I would have been happy to play a disclaimer. I think the whole point of having KBMF as a privileged public access platform is that the various people who live in Butte, which you can't see what I'm gesturing at, but there are like 80 paint portraits on the wall of all of our DJs. People who live in Butte can get on the radio and play the music that they like and talk about the things that they think are funny. And tons of our DJs talk about politics and religion all the time. And I hope that they are all now playing disclaimers as well on their talk shows.
Well, that's the point. I have been with KBMF before we had a board and a station. When the station manager came to town, I volunteered to be the music director and did everything I could to help build the radio station because I have spent the last 35 years of my life building community. I have run open
And
mics.
radio stations.
And radio. Well, I worked at radio before,
Right.
but this is the first ground up radio station that I got to be a part of. And I told him from the very beginning I was very excited about the first 3 years of the station because it hasn't become a thing that people start feeling like it should not change.
It has to keep being that way.
We were able to grow a station where we have a community of programmers who would never meet in the general public that come in and have a potluck once a month pre-COVID. And we get to see people in our community we would never have. We get to share perspectives that we would never share. We get to understand aspects of our own town that we would never understand. And when we started the show, the idea, the premise of the general manager was social justice and education. And I heard a lot of excited chatter from people saying, I'm going to do a show that deals with this issue, and I'm going to do a show that deals with this issue. What has turned out is I don't know where those shows are. It's music shows, which are great, which I appreciate. There's a few talk shows, which are wonderful.
Yeah.
There are some news programming, which the general manager himself does
Said,
program, and he said
It's not important.
It's not important.
It's just fun.
I feel like the show that we do is important.
I feel like our news programming on KBMF is important too.
I feel like the programs that he does is important,
Yeah.
even though he doesn't feel like they're important.
People in Butte should get to hear about what's going on in Butte from people in Butte, not just because some regurgitated newspaper article from another town is telling people what's going on in Butte.
So the reason I'm with this station is because I believe strongly, and it is a mission in my life, to help build community and to help break down dogmas that keep people separated. Engineered division. We have a lot of engineered division, and that engineered division is being ramped up through a lot of panic and a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear. And it's only places like this that I feel like are the things that I want to spend my time on, because this is how we get to know each other. This is how we get to see through what is now called, a term that I really like, is the availability heuristic, also known as availability bias, which I'm going to look that up.
Well, while you look that up,
Yes.
we already know about confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the natural instinct in us to prefer or think that information is right that we already know. If you hear something you already know, you're going to think that it is right more than if you hear something that you don't know yet. If you hear new information, you're probably going to automatically think that's probably not correct just because you're unfamiliar with it. It also translates into an emotional attachment. We prefer information and experiences that we have already had. If you want to extrapolate this out into a very dangerous circumstance, confirmation bias is a lot of what leads people to stay with abusive partners, because the way that that partner treats them is familiar and understandable, and therefore, in a weird, twisted, horrible way, safe.
I will read the Wikipedia entry on availability heuristic. The availability heuristic, also known as availability bias, is a mental shortcut that relies on immediate examples that come to a given person's mind when evaluating a specific topic, concept, method, or decision. The availability heuristic operates on the notion that if something can be recalled, it must be important, or at least more important than alternative solutions, which are not as easily recalled. Subsequently, under the availability heuristic, people tend to heavily weigh their judgments toward more recent information, making new opinions and biased toward that latest news.
So, we remember
The availability of consequences associated with an action is positively related to perceptions of the magnitude of the consequences of that action. In other words, it's easier to recall the consequence of something the greater those consequences are perceived to be. Most notably, people often rely on the content of their recall if its implications are not called into question by the difficulty that they experience in bringing the relevant material to mind. So in other words, say it 3 times and it's true. This is what Adolf Hitler or Ehrlichman said. The Nazis use this program all the time. And this is the program that we see Donald Trump using all the time.
You think things are true because you've heard them more often.
We are in a meme warfare right now.
Right.
People who have a bias start machine gunning memes out because they think the more that meme is out there, the more that has availability bias. And I think it works.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that those memes are correct.
Right.
And the problem with memes is that often people don't know where those memes come from.
Or the context.
And if they're close enough to what they feel, they're willing to let memes go out that may end up warping the thing that they're trying to convey. And what happens is that warps reality.
Right.
And so the common sense that people talk about common sense, is the availability heuristic, which common sense may work to a point, but then there may be new information coming, other things that are happening that makes common sense the wrong thing to do.
Right.
So availability bias is something, if you've never heard it before, might be something to look into. It's something I've been studying this week. This is a part of the educational content we'd like to deliver to you from Post-Orthodoxy.
That's right. So it's 5:39.
Oh, do we have to play another thing? We should just
I played it at the half-hour mark.
We can put it on loop to the end of the show.
This is a not express. I feel really grateful to everybody that tuned in this afternoon. We had a lot of people participating with us on Facebook and Twitch. This is what we want to do. We would love to be able to put out a regular program at a regular time, 2 or 3 or 4 days a week.
Right.
And
it doesn't have to be 2 hours.
It doesn't have to be 2 hours long. It would be more digestible. We can do mini topics. We want topics from our audience. If you guys think of something that you want us to research and talk about, we do a lot of research.
This video, if you're watching this video on Facebook, it is from the Post-Orthodoxy Facebook page. If you have not liked or followed it, if you do, you'll be able to get information.
Yeah, and now that I'm not on the radio, I can tell you, you should totally follow Post-Orthodoxy because we're constantly sharing links to information that we're finding or news sources. Sometimes it might even seem like we're contradicting ourselves, but that's because we're educating ourselves and the world is it hasn't all been pre-decided yet.
Right. We have built a platform on this show. The show itself is a platform that we are using other platforms to spread around. Part of the difficulty for me in building this show is that this show will work best when we have more feedback from the people that listen to this show.
Yes.
And that doesn't start from the beginning.
No.
Because you have to have people listening. So we have been sort of pioneering this idea of being non-binary, of being non-partisan, of being not red or blue, but trying to come up with imagined new policies for us as a country, trying to figure out what institutions be supported and what institutions should be downgraded. These are the things that we're trying to do, and we need your feedback to do it.
We are not having a totalitarian American experience. We are only having our experience of being in the U.S., and you are having a different experience of being in the U.S., and people that have a different political party alignment than you do are having a different experience of being in the U.S. And we want to talk with all of our neighbors, and not just in the U.S. either.
We appreciate having helped build this radio station. I appreciate this platform.
Oh, I love KBMF so much.
I think it's really important for the community, whether we are here or not. It doesn't change the way I feel about the importance of this platform as a value to the community.
I think that's a large part of why I'm so salty about being double layer decker censored by the station
Oh,
manager.
wait. Double secret probation. Yeah,
Double secret probation.
We got double secret probation.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it because I love KBMF and I've been a part of KBMF since early 2018, not as long as Dark. He was the founding music director for the radio station. But I fell in love right away with what KBMF says it's trying to do. And I would hate if misunderstandings between our friends and us about the data that we're sharing on our radio show causes there to be problems for DJs in the future because of a censorship precedent.
The precedent is the big problem for me.
Precedents, it's a big deal. Precedents are a big deal. You don't just set a new thing into motion, definitely not unilaterally just one person.
I think in the beginning, and this is
Well,
me...
he didn't even think he was censoring us.
Well, he said this isn't censorship. I was like, this is the definition of censorship.
Especially the part where you said you can't tell people that I'm telling you not to talk about
This
something.
isn't censorship, is what he told me when he said, don't say things and don't tell people we told you to say things as the station manager. I don't know what's going on with the cognitive, what do you call that?
Cognitive dissonance?
Dissonance in that statement, which makes me have compassion for him because I don't know if he really well thought out what happened. And I would like to see this walk back. I would like to see this
Not
healed.
because we want anybody shamed, not because we're trying
This
to get some of our
precedent is dangerous.
own. We have feelings about it, but even though we have feelings about it, it doesn't mean that we want something changed because of our feelings so that we can get some of our own back. We want this walked back because it's dangerous for the radio station.
I believe in this radio station, and I believe it's dangerous to the radio station that I helped build.
Astrid says, the slick method that the troll factories are using now is making memes that are just funny, and people will eventually start following, and then the political memes are slipped into the material, a way to move people's perspectives and values slowly.
Right. So if you look at a world where partisanship has become toxic, the left-right divide has completely rendered this country on a political level dysfunctional. As I have been saying, we are in a failed state. The government of this country does not perform the function that it was designed to do for the people in the country.
For the people.
The parties keep electing people that are not doing things in the interest of the people that are electing them into office. This is a problem. And it's not going to get better. I don't see a time when suddenly all the Republicans say, you know what, the Democrats were right. We should all just work together. And I don't see that happening on the other side. The only way that we're going to get out of this shit show that we're in is to find some new way of aligning ourselves together that are outside those two corrupt and damaged parties.
We are not saying that the citizens who are in Team Blue or Team Red are corrupt and damaged.
This is not about the Democrats or the Republicans.
Not the citizens.
This is about the DNC and the RNC that is using emotion and rhetoric and propaganda to manipulate very well-intended supporters of the party.
Yeah.
And the only way we're going to get out of it is we have to build a new institution. There has to be a new thing. And maybe it's a third party, but one of the pieces of data that I like to bring out in this educational program is that there was a study done, and maybe you could look it up and post it. There was a study done right after 2016, or at least that's when I found it, and it was called Hidden Tribes.us, I think. Hidden Tribes. Or .me, I don't know what it is. But if you just look up Hidden Tribes, all one word, you'll find it. And they were looking at the non-binary aspect of the parties. They're saying we keep watching the news and we hear about the Democrats and the Republicans. But when you ask people questions, nuanced questions, and they put themselves down, it's not a left or right. It's not a red or blue. That is a minority in the country. The people who are just red aligned and just blue aligned are great minorities in this country.
It's like 26% red, 26% blue, and then the rest of the country is other.
Well, it was 40-something. That you're talking about the presidential election.
Right.
Right. In this study, they're looking at these tribes who are not aligned with the left or the right. There's a lot of different tribes. The largest group that they isolated was a group called the exhausted majority. That is a group that is not being represented. 67% was the number of the exhausted majority. These are people who are saying, I'm tired of the bias in the news. I'm tired of the bias in the parties. I'm tired of having to vote for the lesser of evils. I think we can negotiate. I love my neighbors. I'm tired of all the division. That is a lot. They're saying that's the number of people in this country.
The majority of U.S. citizens wishes we would stop fighting and start working together to fix the country.
The large majority of the people in this country would like to have a sane conversation. The great minority groups in this country are driving the conversation. Or should I say driving the arguments? Because there is no conversation.
Right. Yes. That's what Kevin Olson said earlier. I'm going to read that quote one more time. Arguing is about being right. Discussing is seeking for what is right. Not about me, about what is right.
We're going to keep our GoFundMe up.
Yep.
And see how far we can go to bolster ourselves to provide quality social justice and entertainment programming.
Infotainment and meta news. Here's my dream. Because the website's probably not going to be up until October or November.
We got a ways to go.
But my dream is, this is the last episode of season 1, which podcasters just kind of get to pick arbitrarily what their season is. We just said a year, and also this drama llama moment.
Yeah.
So this is the end of season 1. I say we take 2 or 3 weeks off and get our gear together, research a show on aliens, really start reaching out to the friends of the show and figure out what other topics they really want talked about.
Vet our guests and sources, as we always do.
Get our guests lined up and put together our home studio so that we can start doing these shows live with audience interaction from home with good sound and good video, and have it available for anybody to watch for free.
And then we can dive into some juicier subjects that we can't, out of respect for our community platform and FCC regulation.
We did do a 2-part series on the history of the U.S. drug war. We weren't talking about any personal experiences of anybody that we knew or what people should or should not do about drugs. We just talked about the history of the policy for two weeks. We did that for 4 hours. That was a lot of research.
Right.
But again, there's a lot more that you could talk about that subject, and we can't even begin to touch relationships and sexuality on community radio.
Not because I'm not a psychiatrist and or I don't have the credentials to talk about sex without having it be lewd and lascivious.
Right. If you had credentials, then you could have, if you were a medical doctor of some kind,
if I was a medical doctor or a psychiatrist,
then it would be okay for you to get to talk about sex and relationships.
Right. I am a pope in the Church of the Subgenius, but that doesn't qualify apparently.
Not in this reality.
No.
So I would be very happy with ending our radio show.
Just wind it up and then clean it up and get out of here.
Yeah, I want to have everything nice and clean. I have a lot of equipment to put away today. Maybe I won't have to do it like this ever again.
Right. So I guess we need to resign this post. We'll resign from this time slot when we send the letter to the Butte America Foundation Board.
I'll probably
unless
I think
they want to reverse this autocratic order to censor ourselves.
The board meeting is next weekend. I think the censorship problem is a big problem, and a very concise and clear statement should be brought before the board about the precedent that sets. And it does seem like, knowing how bureaucracy works, there will be a few weeks that we won't be in this slot on KBMF.
At least a few weeks.
At least a few weeks. It may change.
So thank you for tuning in today. Thank you everybody who commented. Thank you to the folks who are supporting our effort to do this more efficiently from home. For you, the audience, it's heartwarming. We really appreciate it.
I'm sorry that our conservative Democrat friends dissed all of you guys for being the chitter-chattery people that were just supporting our idiocracy.
Yes, our overzealous fans.
Validating our feelings.
Yeah.
We think you guys are smart in thinking your own thoughts. We're not supposed to be trusting us either. You're supposed to go think your own thoughts.
Thanks for playing, everybody.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
Good show, baby.
Yeah, well, I haven't ended it yet, so don't go nutso.
Well, I don't mind saying that publicly.
Oh, I love you too.